If you're within 5 years of retirement, I want you to lean in for just a minute and listen to what I'm about to tell you, because there is a window, a very specific window that most people completely overlook. And the reason is they don't even know that it exists. And depending on how much you've saved, that window affects people very, very differently. So for example, somebody with, let's say, $600,000 saved faces one set of risks that are completely different than somebody with, let's say, $2 million faces altogether. Somebody with $4 or $5 million, though, that's an entirely different set of tax consequences that they have to deal with. But here's the real problem. Almost nobody plans retirement in different levels. They just think, hey, I've worked really hard for most of my life. I've saved like I was supposed to. I'm almost there. I'll figure out income when I stop working, when the time comes. And that mindset, though, is exactly how expensive mistakes get made without people even realizing them. There is, though, a 5-year stretch, typically somewhere between the ages of 60 and 65, where decisions you make quietly can determine how much tax you'll pay for the next 20 to 30 years of your life. Not next year, not necessarily your first year of retirement, although it could happen then as well. It could, though, impact decades of your life. And once that window closes, you usually can't rewind the clock. You can't undo the decisions that were made. So before we go too deep into this, if you don't know me, my name is Will Snodgrass. I'm a CFP. I'm the owner of Matt25 Capital. We're a Christian wealth advisory firm located out of Texas, but we work with clients all across the continental United States. What I really want to cover here isn't going to be necessarily individualized, but it is something that we see consistently, so I hope you get a lot of good information out of it. So if you're within 5 years of retirement, this is something that I believe absolutely applies to you. So let's kind of slow this down for a minute and walk through why this window is so powerful and why it is during those years that we mentioned. So during those 5 years, these are really your peak earning years, or they're already a little bit behind you. You may still be working, but bonuses might have already started to taper off. Business income, it might be slowing down a little bit. You haven't started to draw Social Security yet, but you're not taking required minimum distributions yet either. You're not on Medicare yet. In other words, your income picture is often temporarily lower than it was before, and now it's actually more flexible than it was before. And that flexibility is pure gold. Most people, however, don't use it. They don't even realize it. What they do is they just coast, they drift. They think, well, I'll deal with the taxes later, or they'll think of something along those lines. The problem is later becomes more expensive. So let's make this a little bit more personal if I can. I'm gonna break this into 3 broad categories of pre-retirees. Not perfectly precise, but helpful. So if you have roughly $500,000 to $1 million saved, your biggest risk isn't massive RMD tax exposure, despite what you may think. Your biggest risk is actually income tightness. What I mean by that, you retire, you pull too aggressively, markets fluctuate, and suddenly you feel pressure and anxiety that maybe you didn't feel before. For you, this 5-year window is about stress testing your income plan before you actually need to start using it. Now, if you have between, let's say, $1 million and $3 million saved, you likely have a significant portion in pre-tax accounts such as 401ks, IRAs, 403bs, SEPs, things like that. Your 5-year window may be your best opportunity to smooth out future tax exposure. However, if you have $3 million plus, your issue probably isn't, will I have enough? You probably feel already pretty confident about that. Your issue, though, is what's called tax layering, because at 73, RMDs start, which are required minimum distributions, and you have to do them. And if you've accumulated heavily in pre-tax accounts, those required withdrawals can be substantial, and they stack on top of each other. They stack on top of things like Social Security, and they stack on top of whatever else you're doing and whatever else you're drawing from. Same 5-year window, completely different consequences, however. Let's walk through some of the common mistakes people make during this period of their lives, though. Mistake number 1, ignoring future RMD exposure. At age 73, traditional retirement accounts require mandatory annual withdrawals, whether you like it or not. You don't get to choose whether you get to take them or not, or how much the amount is going to be. The IRS is the one that chooses that. Now, here's what most people don't model into their future retirement income plans. They look at their current tax bracket, okay? but they don't look at their future tax bracket, and that is a tremendous mistake. In many cases, the 5 years before retirement are actually lower tax years than the years after retirement. That surprises some people, especially depending on their situation, because here's what they sometimes assume. Hey, I'm not going to be working, so I'll be in a lower tax bracket. And even if that is true, that's not always the case. So it's a dangerous assumption to make. Between Social Security, RMDs, dividends, capital gains, retirement income can really layer up quickly. And that 5-year window is what allows for a person, though, to reposition. Not necessarily aggressively, not necessarily with taking a hatchet where a scalpel's needed, and certainly not doing it emotionally. You need to do it gradually. For some people, that might mean partial Roth conversions spread over multiple years. You need to be testing it, though, not just for this year, but future years. For others, it might mean something simply like mapping projected RMDs. The goal is not to eliminate taxes. Pay unto Caesar what is Caesar's. But the goal is to smooth out taxes, because smooth taxes preserve flexibility. And flexibility in your retirement years is one of your greatest strengths. Mistake number 2, treating Social Security like a standalone decision. Social Security timing is not just about maximizing the monthly benefit, although that is clearly a consideration, but you have to understand it interacts with virtually everything else in your financial life. Up to 85% of your benefit can be taxable depending on your total income. So if you claim at 62, but also start large IRA withdrawals, you may create unnecessary taxation upon yourself. If you delay, though, but don't manage your income in the interim, you may miss strategic opportunities to mitigate tax wherever possible, not just now, but down the road. The 5-year window is where this coordination really happens. It is the sweet spot. Not after you already have filed, not before you file. So let me just kind of pause for a second there. If you're listening and you're thinking this to yourself, hey, Will, I'm not even sure what my projected RMD is, or I haven't modeled how Social Security might impact my taxes, or I don't know what bracket I'll be in at 73 years old. It could be a number of years down the road. That's exactly why we built the Retirement Paycheck Readiness Scorecard, which is a free resource I'll link down below. It's designed for people within about 5 to 10 years of retirement, ideally, not necessarily perfect, but somewhere usually in that window. And what it does, it helps people quickly evaluate their income structure, their tax exposure, Social Security coordination, portfolio alignment, the list goes on, before you make certain decisions that could be irreversible. Now, I'll mention it again at the end because I do think it's a good resource and it's free. And again, I'll link it down below. But for right now, let's just keep moving on with these different examples. Mistake number 3, ignoring Medicare premium cliffs. This one surprises almost everyone that hears about it because they're not fully aware of how Medicare works. Medicare premiums are income-based. That's right, they are income-based. And there are thresholds where even one additional dollar of income can increase your premium for an entire year. That's what's called IRMAA. Most retirees find out about it, though, after the fact, which is usually, again, a dangerous place to be in. The 5-year window, though, allows you to model income before Medicare enrollment starts. That is why coordination matters so much, especially in retirement. Mistake number 4, focusing only on allocation and not asset location. Most people understand the basic concept of stocks versus bonds, and if not, we can talk about that in depth another time. But very few think about where those assets live. Taxable accounts, tax-deferred accounts, Roth accounts, etc. What the location affects, though, is a lot of different things, including withdrawal flexibility, tax efficiency, survivor planning, estate structure, and the list goes on and on. For example, let's take 2 different retirees who have the identical net worth as each other. One, though, is structured efficiently, and one is structured poorly. Their long-term after-tax income outcomes could look very different from each other. And this isn't about complexity necessarily. It's more so about intentional placement of assets. Mistake number 5, thinking about retirement planning starts at retirement. This honestly may be the biggest misconception and maybe the biggest mistake people will make. Retirement income planning does not and should not start when you stop working. Let me say that again. You should not start thinking about this when you're done working already or close to it. It has to start before, preferably years before, because once you retire, some levers completely disappear. You can't unstart Social Security easily. You can't reverse 5 years of missed planning. Once they're gone, they are gone. The 5-year window is about transition and planning for future transitions. It's about moving from the accumulation phase of your life to distribution thoughtfully and intentionally. Now, let me say something that might surprise some of the people listening. Retirement mistakes are not dramatic. They also don't happen overnight. The majority of them are subtle and very slow. They happen because someone made no coordinated decision. They really basically made a decision by not making a decision. Or they followed generic advice like the 4% rule and assumed it applies to everyone. They listened to maybe a podcast, or I hate to say it, a YouTuber, or they read an article, or they tried to DIY something that they didn't fully model out because they maybe didn't understand all the ramifications and nuances. And the cost doesn't show up right away. It shows up years later, maybe even a decade or more later. The 5 years, though, before retirement are about really stewarding your assets wisely. You've taken these years, you've built something for yourself and your family, but now you're having to transition. And that shift, that transition requires wisdom and steady decision-making skills, not urgency, not panic, but clarity. Clarity ultimately is what brings confidence. So if you're 60, 61, 62, 63, etc., anywhere kind of in that window, you are in what I would argue is the most powerful planning window of your entire financial life. And what you do here shapes everything that is going to follow for the rest of your financial life. If you want a structured way to evaluate where you stand right now, like I mentioned, the Retirement Paycheck Readiness Scorecard, this is the name we gave it, is linked below. I think it's going to be a very useful tool for people that are wondering. It's designed specifically, though, for pre-retirees who want at least a little bit of clarity before making income decisions and know roughly where they stand. It only takes a couple of minutes, but it can help people identify blind spots, especially in particular areas related to retirement, such as taxes and Social Security coordination and portfolio positioning, income sequencing, and a myriad of other things if you're not familiar with those things. Just remember, retirement is not about guessing. You should never go into retirement guessing. It is about alignment and coordination. And alignment, especially in this 5-year window, can create decades of confidence. And that confidence can be the difference between a successful retirement and an unsuccessful one. So I hope everybody got some good information about it. If you have any questions or like to reach out to us, you can contact us at Matt25Capital.com, or you can email us directly at info@Matt25Capital.com. Again, my name's Will. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got some good information out of it. Everyone take care and God bless.